Hi you guys, and welcome to my channel. I appreciate you being here, and I hope after watching this tutorial, if you haven't already subscribed, you decide to hit that subscribe button and like this video. So today I'm going to show you how to make this cute little zip pouch, and I designed this to be used as a purse that holds my phone. I don't like carrying a big phone sometimes, so my phone can fit in here and zip it closed, and then I have a little handle that I can use to carry it. And the handle is nice because it can be taken off, and if you want to just attach your keys and use it as a key fob, you can do that as well. So it's pretty versatile. You can take the handle off and just use it as a clutch if you want to. But I also added on a zipper pocket here, so you have some extra storage. You can put some things in here, your cards, some coins, and it's nice because it keeps it separate from your phone so you don't scratch up your screen. And one other thing I went ahead and did was add a little sleeve in here so that if you do put your phone on one side, you can store some other things on the other that also won't scratch up your phone. So with all that said, let's move on and take a look at what you will need to make this cute little zip purse. Let's get started. Okay, so here are the supplies you will need, and here are the cuts you will make. These measurement details are also on my website, createbeautifulquilts.com. First, you will fuse your interfacing to the wrong side of all your fabric, leaving a 1/4 inch seam around the edge. You may want to use a pressing cloth. Okay, so we have the interfacing on our other pieces, so now I like to work on some more of the prep work, which is getting the loops and the handles and the zipper pull ready. So to do that, we're gonna press the fabric that we cut out, and I get clips ready that I like to use. I have 2 different clips that I really like. I like these because they're a little bit longer, so since these are gonna be 1-inch pieces finished, they work really well. And then I use Wonder clips. Either will work. You can just pin it if that's what you have. It doesn't really matter. You're just gonna want something to hold these pieces in place after you press them and keep them ready for you when you go to sew. So pins, clips, whatever works for you. So to do this, first we're going to fold our strip of fabric in half. And this is going to be the same for all of them. So press in half. And now you have that line that you can bring your edges in toward. So bring them into that pressed middle line. And we're going to press again. Okay. And then after you have it pressed, we're going to add our strip of batting, and this is just going to be a little bit more reinforcement. You don't have to use the batting. I just like the little bit thicker loop here that's going to be on the side of the bag. Okay, so then we press that again, and then it holds in place nicely. And so we're going to do the exact same thing with this other piece. So we're going to fold it in half and press it. And then we're going to bring in the edges to that center press line. Now you can press one at a time if you want. So you could bring one side, and you'll probably get it a little bit evener, is that even a word, than I do if you do it that way. So you could press one side and then bring the other side in. Whatever works best for you, whatever causes the least amount of burns from your iron. Okay, so have them pressed, and then all we're going to do now is just put them together like so. So they're just going to be on top of each other, and then we're going to do a stitch along the sides once we go over to the sewing machine. But like I said, I like to get all of these ready and just sit at the sewing machine and finish them up. So add the clips, and then they're ready to sew. Okay, so to prep the zipper pull for sewing, it's going to be very similar to what we just did. We're going to fold it in half and press, and then we're going to fold the edges into the center again. And press them. It's a very tiny piece of fabric, so this is not easy, but you have to have it small enough to fit into your zipper loop. And then instead of folding this one and putting it on top, this time we're just folding them in together because it'll hide all of those rough seams or rough edges from the fabric. So fold it in and press and clip, and then you're going to do the same thing with the other one because there's two zippers on this bag. Okay, and after it's pressed, put the clips on to hold it in place for sewing. And then we're going to do the same with this strip of fabric. Okay, so now we have two zipper pulls prepped, our bag loop and our key fob / handle loop all prepped. So we're going to take them over to the sewing machine to sew. Okay, so now that we have our handle and everything prepped and ready to go, we're going to sew as close to both edges as we can without falling off. Maybe about 1/8 of an inch or so is a good guide. So yeah, let's just sew. I'm not gonna back stitch or anything right here. If it's a habit for you, that's fine, just do it. The reason I'm not going to is because the ends of these straps are actually gonna get clipped into some key fob hardware. So it's gonna get nice and secured either way. So here you may want to go nice and slow to try to get a nice straight line here because it's going to show on your strap. It's not going to be on an inside seam or anything that will get hidden. And it's nice here too to use like a nice thread that either blends in or is a fun contrast to your design. So when I get to the end, because I need to go and stitch the other side, I just raise my presser foot and leave my needle down and sew to the other side, and then raise my presser foot, pivot, and sew the other side here. So if you can see, it looks like my my bottom strip of fabric shifted out a little bit here. So it didn't get lined up as much as I would have liked it to. but since the fabrics are the same print, hopefully it won't show up too much that they became uneven. Okay, and so there is one of the straps. And the nice thing you can do is kind of decide which side looks nicer and have that on the outside when you know, make your loop. One side may have turned out a little bit better than the other. All right, so now we're just gonna do the same with the smaller strap here. Okay, so one more thing I want to do to prep these loops is add the hardware. So for your smaller 6-inch handle loop, we're going to add the D-ring to that. And so what we're gonna do is just slip it on in, even it out, and we're gonna sew across the ends, and we're gonna sew as close to the D-ring as we can. So first we're gonna sew along the ends. I have a bad habit of leaving needles and clips here, and it's not a good idea because they could move into the needle. Just as I pull them off, I have the worst habit of leaving them there. Okay, so we're gonna sew there. I'm gonna trim off the threads. And then, like I said, we're gonna sew as close to the D-ring as we can. So what I do is I put the presser foot down where it's right up against the D-ring. And then I move my needle over as close as I can. Now this works on my machine because the needle moves and everything. I know everybody has different sewing machines. So I might be able to get it a little bit closer than you can, and that's okay. It's just to kind of keep it in place a little bit and keep it from moving around a lot. So I'm gonna sew across. Here I'm gonna back stitch because this isn't gonna get hidden within the purse or anything like that. So I'm gonna back stitch to secure it nicely. Okay, and there we go. It looks beautiful. So one thing you can do if you want to get, you know, a little fancier like you often see on bags is you can sew another strip of stitches right next to it. You could do some X's, you know, do a farther stitch and do an X. Anything fancy like that. I'm just gonna leave it as it is, but there we go. That part is another step finished. So I'm going to show you how I attach the hardware for our key fob loop or purse handle loop as well. Okay, so what you'll need for this step is the handle that we made and some pliers. These came with my key fob hardware, and you're going to want to sew first these two pieces together. Now, you'll want to choose which side you think looks a little bit nicer. So I think this side's the nicer of my sewing. So I'm going to have that on the outside of the loop. And then I'm just going to sew these together. And I back stitched all the way across there. And I'm going to trim my threads. So now what we'll want to do is trim off these rough edges. So I get right up by those stitches that I made and trim, and I probably should have grabbed my fabric scissors, not my thread scissors, but it works. So now we have a nice straight edge there. So we'll need our hardware and our pliers. So what I usually do is add my hardware into the pliers because it'll hold it in place. The ring can get in the way, so you can remove that if you need to. I just kind of get it where it's sticking out of the side there. So I have the pliers holding that, and then I put the ends of the handle in, and then you'll want to make sure that it's even on both sides, and then just clamp it closed. and you want to make sure it's good and closed so it doesn't slip out. And then to know that you've got it good and closed, you can look on the other side and you'll see that the teeth came through the fabric. Okay, and there you go. Isn't it cute? And if you notice that any threads are hanging out the side, you can just go ahead and trim those off too, because that might happen. But you can trim that up and it's not a big deal. But there we go. So now for the zipper pull, you're gonna need to make sure it's lined up on one of your feed dogs or it's not gonna pull through. So I have it lined up on one of the feed dogs, and then I moved my needle over as close as I could to the edge so that I could sew right along and close up the zipper pull strip. There we go. And that's that. So I'm going to sew the other zipper pull as well. There we go. So we have already got a lot of our stuff prepped and finished. We have our handle, and it can also double as a key fob because you could just add your keys on here. And then we have our D-ring loop finished, and we have 2 of our zipper pulls finished. So now what we're going to do is add our zipper onto our zipper pocket, okay? Okay, so here's what you'll need for this step of our iPhone clutch project. So you need the fabric that is going to be your main purse fabric. So the outside of the purse, you'll only need one of them that already has the interfacing on it, and you'll want that fabric facing up. Then you'll need your pocket fabric, and you'll want to center it on that main fabric face down, and the interfacing is already applied. So you'll want to line that up, and if you really wanted to make sure it was nice and centered, you could measure, or you could press and fold your fabric. I'm just gonna eyeball it. I'm a rebel like that. So you'll have them laying together, and as you'll see, I put some marks on the interfacing. And what I did was I measured 1 inch down and drew a line, and then I did 3/8 of an inch down and did my bottom line that goes all the way across. I measured in 1 inch and did a line. I measured in 1 inch and drew a line. And then within this inner rectangle here, I drew a line cutting that in half. And then I drew some triangles coming out to that center line. Okay, so that's how I drew that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to pin all of these layers together. So I'm gonna place a few pins because I'm gonna bring this to the sewing machine. And this is working on that pocket, that zipper pocket. So I have a 5-inch zipper here that is going to go within here when we finish prepping that. So what we're gonna do is sew around this box, okay? Okay, so I have my needle at the middle, and I'm gonna line up my red middle line here with that rectangle I drew, and I am gonna backstitch. And I'm just gonna follow that inner rectangle here that I drew. So when I get to the end, I'm gonna lift up and pivot. Pivot. Okay, and now I completed that box. I'm gonna back stitch. I'm gonna cut these threads and then I'll show you the next. Okay, so now we have gotten to the next stage. We cut along those lines that we drew down the center and then the triangle. You just don't want to cut through the thread box you sewed. Okay, so you want to snip the triangles right up to the threads, cut down the middle, and then we're going to prep to sew again. So what we're going to do is fold down our pocket top. Okay, and we're going to top stitch along here, but we don't want to really sew past the triangle here. So what I like to do is, just so I have something to see, is I'll mark lines where I don't want to sew past. So I'll just kind of look and mark and mark. So we're going to top stitch across the top, and then we're going to do pretty much the same thing with the bottom part of the pocket. We're going to fold it up. I'm just going to finger press it, and then I'm going to look and see where the triangle is, and I don't want to sew past there. And I'm just using chalk because it wipes away really easily. So we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and top stitch between those marks that we did. And one thing to keep in mind is you really want to sew close to the edge, because you don't want to sew like the pocket area. Up here, you know, you want to stay below this opening. Okay, so keep that in mind when you sew. Okay, so we're gonna top stitch across here. Right now I have the seam between my main fabric and my pocket fabric. I have it lined up right at the middle. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move my needle over too, and then I know that I won't be too far over into that zipper opening, but I'll also be close to the edge to create a nice top stitch there. So I'm gonna back stitch one, and I'm just gonna follow along the seam so that I know I have a nice straight line here. And so I'm gonna go all the way over to that marked area I have. Back stitch a little, come back forward, and then I'll snip those threads and we'll do the other side. Just gonna make sure, so I didn't sew anything I wasn't supposed to together, so that's perfect. Okay, and so I'm gonna do the same on this side. I have my marked areas, my needle's already lined up, so I'm just gonna drop it down, make sure everything's pressed over, sew a few stitches and back stitch, and then come on through. Okay, so I'm gonna snip my threads, and I'll show you what we prepped all this for. Okay, so we did all that prep work and we're ready for the big flip. So what we're gonna do is push all of this through so that it will create our pocket. So then we'll want to line up these seams. and press that down. But that is our zipper opening. So once we get it all nice and pressed, we'll line the zipper up and stitch around it. So that'll be a nice little zipper pocket on the outside of our iPhone clutch purse. Okay, so we have the zipper in here. I lined it up nice and even. And what we're gonna do is sew around, do a top stitch around the zipper area, and that'll hold the zipper in place. Now I went ahead and am going to attach the zipper foot onto my sewing machine. It just makes it a little easier to get up along the edge of the zipper. Okay, so I have my zipper foot on and we're gonna sew along the edge of the zipper area. The back stitch a few, remove that needle. And just remember, you'll want to be fairly close to the edge because you want to make sure you're catching the zipper fabric below, because the whole point of this is to attach the zipper, make sure it's in place. And I'm just removing needles as I work and just essentially making a nice little square around the zipper area. You need to make sure the zipper's away. So what you can do also is you can, you know, pull the zipper out of the way. If you don't have a zipper foot, that can work on getting you a little ways away from the zipper to get around it. Okay, and then I'm just going to come up and meet where I started and back stitch. Okay, and we are almost finished with this step. We are going to cut the threads, and the only thing we have left to do is making our actual pocket, because right now, I mean, there's just fabric laying there. There's not an actual pocket. So a good thing to do here too is to make sure that you caught the zipper the whole way around, and it looks good. So let's make the pocket. So to make the pocket, you're gonna fold your fabric up and you're gonna sew around. I find it easiest to start here, sew up, sew this way and sew down, because you're not gonna have to sew the bottom. It's folded, so it'll already be nice and closed. So if you want, you could place a few pins to hold everything in place. This is gonna be inside, so you know, it's not too big of a worry about how this outside's gonna look. It's gonna be inside the lining of the purse, but you of course want to make sure you catch all the fabric together so there's no holes in your pocket. Okay, so let's meet at the sewing machine and sew this pocket together. Okay, so when you sew the pocket, one of the main things you'll want to do is make sure the main fabric of your purse is out of the way when you sew. I'm just going to sew this pocket closed with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to back stitch here because this is going to be the bottom of the inside of your pocket, and you want to make sure that it's nice and secure. So I'm going to sew along here with this 1/4 inch seam. You're going to want to make sure that you catch all the fabric. Okay, and so here we're going to need to fold that fabric down again and pivot. So make sure all the fabric's out of the way. Now you can do these one at a time instead of trying to go all the way around if that's easier for you. Can be a little hard going along here because the bulk of this fabric's going to want to push your presser foot away. I'm just going to back stitch there even though I'm not cutting threads there. Okay, make sure the fabric's out of the way, and then sew along this last side of our pocket. Okay, and so what I like to do here is make sure that I caught all the fabric on both sides. See here, I missed some of the fabric, so that'd be a hole in the pocket. So it's important to do this before you close everything up, because you don't want all your change or whatever you're putting in there to fall through that into the inner lining of your pouch, because it'll be hard to get it back out. So what I'll do here is I'm going to move this over to a 1/2 inch seam instead of a 1/4 inch, just so that it's nice and even, and that should catch all of that opening there. Make sure, where is my stiletto, that fabric is over and gets caught this time. Perfect. You don't want to stick your fingers down there at the needle, so I like using the stiletto because I can hold things in place and make sure it gets caught without putting my finger in the danger area. And that looks good. It looks like we caught all the fabric that time. Okay, so now let's take a close look at what we made here. So this is it could be the front or the back of our bag that we're making. And now we have a pocket for it. And here is how it looks. So you have a nice amount of room in here. You could put, your credit card, your ID, some change, whatever you need to carry along with your iPhone if that's what you're making this purse for. So we have a big step finished. We have the pocket. I think that's one of the longest steps because there's a lot of things you need to do to prep and put the pocket together. But once you know how to make these pockets, it's really easy to add it to different projects and purses. So it's a fun skill to learn. So now we're going to work on the sleeve divider in our bag. And what we're going to want to do is put the right sides together on these two pieces of fabric, and we're going to pin it. I'm just going to place pins on each side, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam only along the length of these rectangles. As you can see, I already sewed a 1/4 inch seam along this side, so we're just going to sew, I sewed a 1/2 inch seam. I'm just going to go with it. It'll work either way. I forgot to adjust my needle. It's always good to double check stuff like that. It should work either way, and you get the idea. But my measurements had been for a 1/4 inch seam, so my sleeve is going to look a little bit smaller because I didn't follow my own directions. Okay, so we have our sleeve here, and what we're going to do is turn it right sides out and then press it. And after we finish this part, we should have a good amount of our prep work finished. Now, if you want to, you could do some fun things to this, do some quilting, or put a nice design on it if you would like to, write something across it with thread, whatever you want to do, you could do at this stage. Okay, so I decided to add a little bit of quilting detail to my sleeve that's going to be inside of the bag. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pin it to the right side of the lining of our bag. And so we're just going to baste it in place. And what you're going to want to do is kind of decide how far up from the bottom you want your sleeve to be. You're going to want it at least a ½ inch up. So I marked that on the ruler. And it's just kind of, if you're going to use it as a phone sleeve, think about how big your phone is. If you want it to line up about in the middle, you know, you could move the ruler up and say, okay, I probably want it maybe almost an inch from the bottom. And remember that an inch may actually be only a ½ inch from the bottom, because you're going to sew a quarter inch to a ½ inch inseam. So I'm going to place mine here an inch up from the bottom as it is, because it's probably likely only going to be 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom if I sew a ½ inch inseam. So I'm going to use my Wonder Clips, because this is getting to be a lot of fabric, and needles are kind of hard to place through all of this fabric. So I'm just gonna Wonder Clip this in place and sew it in place. And this is just temporary, so if you want to do a wider basting stitch, you can here. I'm just gonna stitch as it is. And remember, you don't want to go too far in on this, because you want these basting stitches to get hid in when we do the final bag assembly. Okay, so now we are going to start assembling the bag. So what you need to do is lay down one of your lining fabrics. We're going to line up our zipper on it. And you want a little bit off on each side. And then we're going to lay, now notice our lining fabric is right side up. And our zipper. And then we're going to lay our main fabric right side down. Because, you know, when we sew, we put our fabrics facing together, right? So we're going to pin this in place, put our zipper foot on, and sew across here. Okay, so we're finished sewing across this side. And that means one side of the bag is finished. Okay, so we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side, and then we're going to top stitch. So remember, we're placing our lining fabric down. Our zipper, we're lining up on top of it. And then we want to make sure our pocket is up. And we're going to place that on top, pin and sew. Okay, so now we have the other side sewn. This is the side that had the pocket on it. Okay, so now you see we have one side of the purse and the other side. I'm going to go press these. I'm going to go press these open, and we're going to top stitch along both sides here. And you see inside, this fabric is so beautiful. I love this fabric. We have our sleeve here for holding our iPhone inside the purse and kind of keeping it from knocking around into everything else. So let's go press these and top stitch. We're in the home stretch here. We are seriously almost done with this. Okay, so we're going to top stitch right along the bag here. This will just give a nice finished look to everything. I may need to shift over and change my needle because the foot was lined up on this zipper and not wanting me to sew. So I'm gonna just move my needle over to where I want it. There we go. Okay, so we're just gonna sew a top stitch along here. It'll give a really nice finished look to the bag. Get the zippers out. When I get closer to the zipper, what I'm going to do is raise my foot here but leave my needle down and just kind of move it out of the way. So if you don't do that and your foot hits the zipper, it's going to make a really weird looking top stitch design on your bag. And after all the work you've done, you probably don't want it to do that. Okay. Okay, so one more thing we want to do before we sew the entire bag together is decide where you want your loop to go and how far out you want it to extend from the bag. So if you want it to only extend out a little bit, I would suggest trimming your loop down a little bit because you don't want all of this bulk on the inside of your bag. You just want like a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. I probably want mine to only extend about that much from the bag. So I'm gonna cut a sizable portion of my loop off. So maybe right there. And I'm gonna go ahead and sew this really quick. And now I'm gonna kind of decide where I want to base this to on the lining. So I want it near the top of my bag, but I don't want it right, you know, right up on the zipper. So probably about here. And I'm going to pin it to just the top, the main fabric of the bag. You don't want to pin it through the lining. So I'm going to move the lining out of the way and just have bag. I'm going to line it up about with, you know, where the zipper's at. It's kind of a good guide there. And I'm going to baste this in place. So I'm going to baste right along here to keep it in place. Okay. Just to show you how easy this is to mess this up before doing it, we want this facing in. So the whole time I'm looking at it as how I want it to look on the outside of my bag, and I was so close to basting it the wrong way. You want your strap facing in. So just to recap, I sewed a 1/2 inch seam here at the beginning when I meant to do a 1/4 inch, and I almost faced this the complete wrong way so that it would sew into the lining of the bag rather than the outside. So you know what, anybody can make mistakes with sewing. I've done it 80 million times and ripped more seams than I would care to talk about, and it's just gonna happen. You either got to figure out a way for it just to be okay, like with the sleeve here, or if I had sewed this the wrong way, it would have been a travesty that I would have had to undo a lot of steps. So thankfully I caught it, and hopefully now that I showed you that, you won't ever do it yourself. So again, we faced our little D loop in, and we only sewed it to the main outer fabric. So now we're ready to sew our entire bag together. And something that you really need to remember is you want to unzip your bag. Otherwise you cannot flip your bag at the end. So remember to do that. And then we're going to place some clips around our bag. So what we're going to do is start with our zipper area. And we're going to want to face those together, and they're naturally going to want to go in toward the lining part of the bag. So just let them do that. Line them up and clip. And the same with the other side. Let them fold into the inner part of the bag. It's not going to be as easy to fold them on this side because of the zipper. But we're going to go around the bag doing that. And here on the lining on the bottom, I'm going to place pins to remind me that we're going to leave an opening wide enough for our hand to kind of fit through. Okay, so everywhere else I'm going to place clips, but down at the lining, we're wanting to leave some room to flip the bag, okay? So go ahead and place clips all the way around. Okay, so I'm just gonna start where my first needle was, start sewing a 1/4 inch seam back stitch. When I reach a corner, I'm gonna leave the needle down and turn and sew. So I'm gonna sew up to where the zipper is. And then I'm just gonna carefully lift up and move in past where the prongs are of the zippers so that I don't break my needle. I'm just removing clips and everything as I sew, and you may see that it looks like I'm not sewing a 1/4 inch seam. I'm doing a 1/4 inch seam from the top fabric that I can see because it's closer in than this bottom fabric, and I'm just going to trim later so that I don't have a lot of bulk. There can be a lot of shifting and stuff like that that takes place on these bags. So I can see that the fabric under here is a little farther out than the top, so I'm letting the interfacing here be my guide. And there's a lot of bulk here because of the tab that we have in here with the D-ring on it. So I'm actually going to raise my presser foot a little bit to allow for the bulk there. And then I'm gonna sew up to where the zipper is. And again, I'm gonna lift up over it so I don't. Okay, so before flipping the bag, I actually trimmed off the corners and I trimmed off the zipper bulk. So you might wanna do that. It'll just, your bag will lay a little bit flatter if you do that. So now I am going to pull my bag, and like I said, you wanted to open that zipper in the middle so you could stick your hand all the way through there, and then you want to pull everything out, and it's gonna take a little bit of maneuvering and things like that to get everything to flip. And we are in the home stretch and creating this bag, so you're really gonna want to push the corners out here, because if you don't push them out now, it's going to be really hard after you finish up the lining. So get the corners out looking nice. So we have that little sleeve here. Let's even everything out there. And then to finish the bag off, we're gonna need to sew up the lining here. So that'll fold in and we'll pin across there and sew that closed. Okay, so my lining is pinned and I'm just gonna sew across here to close the linings. Okay, so that closes the lining that we used to flip the bag around. I'm just going to trim these threads. And after we turn this bag, we are finished. Okay, so we sewed the lining shut, so we're just going to push that inside the bag. Get it down in the corners. And so now we have that sleeve there where we can put our phone. And then if we put other stuff in here, it won't hit up against the phone. And zip that shut. Close there. And we can either just hold it as a clutch, or we have a handle we can attach on now, or you'll have a matching key fob. So you have storage here. There's room to fit your phone and put a few other things in there, but you have that divider that keeps your screen protected. And then if you want, you could add the finishing touch of these zipper pulls. So you could just tie it on like that and clip, or what I like to do, I shouldn't have tied it so tight. I didn't think I was. What I prefer to do is loop it through like this. And then my fat fingers allow, do another knot and trim, but they may not allow me to right now. I might have to get my daughter to do it. She has tiny little fingers. There we go, little extra detail, and you could trim these to whatever length you like or tie them in a knot again. There we go. Cute little purse for your phone. Thank you so much for watching this iPhone purse tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments if you made it. If you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel and give this video a like. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.